Hi, welcome everyone. We're excited to have you here for today's webinar. My name is Mitch Ashley. I am CTO with Textron Group and also principal at the research firm Textron Research. We have a great topic for you today. We are talking about balancing the need for speed with quality. So it's been a topic for a while, right? If you've been in the either the testing or the software delivery part of the game. So let's take a little bit of housekeeping here so that you know what's happening. We're going to be talking about some data that we did some research on, some polls that we took with a few questions around this topic. And we'll be sharing that, and I'll be introducing our panel members in just a moment. Just so you know, we are recording this webinar, so everyone who's registered will get an email with a link to the recording. And we also will include the full write-up that we have on this data. So you'll be getting that as well. Feel free to take notes, but you always have the ability to go back and watch parts of the webinar again, or also look at the document that we'll be sharing. Also, we are giving away some gift cards at the end of the webinar, so please hang around and see if you might be one of our winners. Last but not least is the platform that we use for our webinars is really great for interactivity. You can sit back and watch and listen and see what folks have to say. You can also be part of the conversation. So feel free to jump in. Somebody's already jumped in there. Paul, thanks for doing that. Jump in and comment on what we're discussing. Ask a question. You can post the question either in the Q&A area or you can put it in the chat if we're in that flow. It's not rude to talk on chat while you're listening to what we're saying. We actually like that because then we'll kind of get feedback from you and we may actually adjust our course of our conversation based on some of the things you might share with us through the chat or the QA. So we'd love to have you do that. So let's get to our topic, balancing the need for speed with quality. It's my great pleasure to introduce speakers today. First is April May, who is VP Testing Advisors with Testlio. Welcome, April. Good to have you with us.
Hi there. Nice to be here.
Good to have you. Next is Emeka, who is with Testlio also. He is VP of Partner Ecosystems. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Mitch.
You bet. April, would you start? Would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yep, for sure. Hi, I'm April May, really. That is my name. And I was born in June. I've been a solution architect in the software delivery automation arena for just shy of 20 years. And in that time, I've been really privileged to work with so many companies on their digital transformation strategies and helping them really deeply consider some of the types of questions and topics that came up in this survey. And I've just recently joined Testlio to lead the testing advisory function. And so I welcome any and all of your questions after this session today, during, or just brainstorming on these topics. And I'm videoing in from Boulder, Colorado. And I picked this image as a desperate plea to the snow gods because we need some snow here.
We had our first snow last week, but it's been a while. So great. Next, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you. I think you can tell us a little bit about Testlio too.
Sure. So first, a little bit about myself. So my name is Emeka Obiano. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I'm part of the senior leadership team at Testlio, and my day job responsibility is to drive our partner ecosystem strategy, which means establishing who we're going to work with in market to support our enterprise customers and obviously executing against those relationships. My background is 20 plus years, as my loss of hair will indicate, in the enterprise software and services arena. So I've worked in a few different capacities, everything from advisory services to service delivery consulting to being part of technology organizations, a couple of which have played directly in the DevOps space and directly in testing services as well. So that's my history and background. A quick note on Testlio. So Testlio is, at the highest level, a testing services company. We operate testing services now at this point with a global network of testers that are doing both manual, human-assisted, and automated testing. Our network now spans over 160 different countries. And the capability set that we bring to the table for our clients is not only the human-assisted personnel to drive testing outcomes, but we couple that with a platform that actually integrates with the enterprise DevOps tool set to deliver a more seamless testing experience. So that's Testlio in a nutshell.
Wonderful. And that is the era we're in, is really that tool chain, the workflow pipeline of DevOps, and how it's all part of a software delivery process. And we work as a team, cross-functional team. Well, let's start with this question that we really titled the webinar after, the balance of speed and quality, right? Sometimes you look at that as is one or the other, or one takes away from the other. Can you do both at the same time? April, you're not your first time, I bet, answering this question. What are your thoughts about it?
No, not the first, but I will get on my soapbox a little bit. I consider myself a true believer that it's not a zero-sum game, as you said, that like one of these things has to suffer at the hands of the other. I sort of equate it to a conversation about work-life balance, which is getting, a lot more attention in the last couple of years, as it rightly should. Balance to me implies that when one thing is up, the other is down, like a balance. When one thing gets attention, the other thing suffers. And basically it's your job to pick which thing is suffering on a year or month or moment basis. But I believe that things like satisfaction, happiness, self-esteem, belonging, purpose, a whole bunch of other things that you can get from one part of your life is sort of the rising tide that lifts all boats. And it's just the how that's highly individualized based on personal need. And so I think this idea of speed and quality of software delivery coexisting is sort of in the same vein. And there are a lot of corollaries. There's a really unique, really contextual answer for every company, but these things can not only coexist, but they can thrive together. So what I guess I would say and what I would start with is take heart. It has been absolutely proven, and I have seen it myself in many, many companies, that what you do to improve speed of delivery will positively impact quality, and the reverse is also true. So that is my soapbox.
Interesting. You have some great perspectives that align with mine as well. How about you, Emeka?
Yeah, so I love April's reference to avoid the zero-sum game, because I think all too often at the enterprise level, there's this notion that I've got to give up one for the other. If I want to move faster, I'm going to sacrifice quality. And I think generally speaking is a misnomer. Certainly at Testlio, we believe it's a misnomer. We think you need to optimize across both dimensions. The reality is no brand should be out there looking for speed at the cost of quality, because it's just a matter of time before that brand pays a negative price for that posture. It's just a matter of time before something happens as it relates to their user base and the quality of the experience they deliver to their user base that has really detrimental effects, right, on their brand and sustainability in market and in industry. The other perspective that I'll offer is almost to zoom out from the enterprise. And I can't help myself here because I'm a partner ecosystem guy, right? So I tend to sort of look at the bigger, across a bigger set of stakeholders. And I think the rally cry here is for us as an industry, right, to come alongside the enterprise and help the enterprise not be forced into some dangerous trade-offs between speed and quality. I love the phrase continuous delivery without compromise, because it forces all of us who are advocating for continuous delivery, right? Nobody should question the fact that speed is paramount. There's way more pressure on enterprises today across every industry to deliver more software experiences faster and to be able to make those adjustments faster. COVID-19 taught all industries the need to be able to pivot from a digital perspective. But when you force that phrase, continuous delivery without compromise, and you underline the without compromise part, then us as an industry have a responsibility to do it and enable continuous delivery in a responsible way. And it doesn't matter whether you're selling a code management platform, doesn't matter if you're in the testing arena like Testlio is, doesn't matter if you're a continuous delivery automation engine, if you're technology, if you're services. As a broader industry, we have a responsibility to not, either because of our practices, our rhetoric, how we position ourselves in market, that we don't lead enterprises down this dangerous path of being forced to sacrifice quality in favor of speed. Because to April's point, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. And I guess my punchline here is it's not just the enterprise's job, right, to do that, right? As a tool set, as a set of best practices and expertise, we all have to bring that mindset regardless of what piece of the tool chain we're offering up in market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Just offer a little perspective too, because I've been a practitioner as well as a product creator and an analyst. If I was going to redo things, step back maybe 8 or so years, I'd separate CI and CD and I'd insert CT, continuous testing, because it's all part of that. That's what we're really talking about, right? It isn't like, I mean, yes, testing happens all through the spectrum of software, whether it's unit testing early on or performance or a security test or whatever it might be that you're doing at different phases of this. And I think that question about speed or quality or speed and quality that I posted into the chat, we're in a time where, because we've elevated the role of testing, it's people know that it's extremely important. It's not shoved off to the end like it maybe once was, and I know it once was. I was guilty of that myself. And developers, everyone knows that it's something that you do throughout the process, and it's also something you both automate and you do human testing. And because of that, this continuous delivery, we have to have the ability to deliver software that's of high quality, not just once, but every time, right? It's not like we're doing it once a quarter, once a week, whatever. It can be once a day, multiple times a day. So it really, so it's not like we can put out 3 good releases and 1 bad one, or 3 update deploys and one bad one. They all have to maintain that quality, improve it, or have the ability to react and fix it and bring it back up if we have a bug or vulnerability or something in our software. So yeah. I guess my message is we're working in an era where it is possible, I think, to do both and do it in a continuous fashion, because we're not stuck at the end trying to make it all up in an impossible time frame. We get to do it all throughout the software process. So, cool. Yeah. I bet we're all in agreement about that.
Oh, yeah. Vicious nods going on.
I see that. Yeah, violent agreement, we call it.
Very violent agreement.
Well, let's look at some of the data, some of the work that TechStrong Research did working with you. We gathered some data from people that are in the DevOps community, testing community, and cloud native and mainframe application, kind of across the board. A lot of folks that follow the content that we create. I wanted to bring up some of the slides that we have. I'm not going to go through every one of these. I'm going to jump around just a little bit here. And I won't keep slides up forever. We won't do death by slides. But one of the questions we asked about is how much of your testing is currently automated. And I know there's sort of this statement of, well, shouldn't it all be automated, right? Well, I mean, wasn't that the best place to be, is where there is no human in the loop? And I think there's some arguments to be made about, no, it's actually the right blend. When you look at this data, you look at 42% saying there's some test automation, 19% fully automated. So, we don't have a lot of people saying we've really got most of it. Some people doing all manual testing. We aren't at that end of the spectrum very much either, right? So we're in this middle ground of some automation testing, almost half, and 26 a quarter of the responses were that they're inspiring to automate more. So we're still in this journey of automation and trying to figure out the right things to automate, right? It doesn't help to automate the wrong things. all you do is the wrong things faster. I'm curious your reactions based on this balance of speed and quality. Mecca, maybe if you want to go first, what's your reaction to this data?
Well, first, just to echo what you said, Mitch, I think the journey is real, right? Which I think is a beautiful thing. The data is showing here that enterprises are adopting and looking to adopt test automation as a means to strike this balance, right? It goes back to the topic we just covered, right? Automation's role is part of the equation when it comes to how do you balance between speed and high quality digital experiences for your end users of your application. So I think we first need to celebrate that, right? We first need to sort of acknowledge everybody's on this journey. I like your continuous test sort of needs to be this core component of our lexicon when it comes to continuous integration and continuous deployment, and having it as a core set of things we think about. I tend to even broaden the aperture even more, right? I like the term continuous quality because it takes that a step further, and it says, not only does it automation need to be part of the way you think about the continuous integration and continuous deployment continuum, but it even says beyond that, think about what are the different ways in which you can leverage automation. Because sometimes we get stuck in, automation really means when a developer is doing a pull request, there's an automated test run that validates that pull request. Or is the developer accountable, right? Using automation to do unit testing, right? And automate what they're about to check in or the piece of code that they've written on behalf of the enterprise. So I think taking a step back and looking at the full continuum, and Mitch, you referenced this a minute ago, and saying, what's the role of automation really across the full life cycle? If you take some of Tesla's customers, for example, we have enterprises that are not only highly reflective of continuous test automation in the construct of leveraging a technology to, there's plenty out there, including some of the things we do to empower developers to be able to do test automation. But they're also looking at automation in the construct of things like in the wild, real world testing. How do I automate a use case that allows me to conduct testing, even post-deployment, post-production in the real world? And how do I automate that? There's some elements of that need to be human run, but how do I invoke automation in that construct as well? So I do believe that a big part of this is, again, let's celebrate the journey. Let's celebrate that automation is being embraced as a way to strike this balance. It's one of several key components to strike the balance between speed and quality. But one of the things we try to advocate with our clients is think about automation in a broader construct, right? Things that can happen prior to development, during the development process, as part of the deployment process, as part of the release candidate process, and even further right? How do I do things, leverage automation to test things in the wild, to create this continuous feedback loop that helps me go faster while being responsible about what I'm putting out there.
Mm-hmm. April, I know quite a few software organizations that would love to have like some automation. Not everyone is there, and folks are on that journey, as Mecca talked about. Well,
Yeah.
What's your reaction to this data?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the number of times that I've been asked for, just give me your DevOps tools. I just need your DevOps tools because the want is so strong, and this, but the data doesn't surprise me much. But I caution the thinking about it in terms of good and bad. Again, the question for me is about how you drive optimal results. So I'm sort of a optimization wonk or geek. I love that kind of stuff. And yes, if more of the testing can be automated, make it a goal, put a lot of focus on how you get there. And to Emeka's point, exactly, if you can do continuous integration with automated testing, you should definitely be doing that, because that is really, really, that CI practice is really important. And that is part of the CI practice, is the testing part of it. But I talked to some folks the other day who are building software where very little of the testing can be automated. And what little of it can be already is. So in their world, in a lot of people's world, some things just have to be done by people. That is an extreme example, but it just shows how individualized this is. And it's kind of one of the reasons why maturity models, and I know we don't have a section on this on maturity models, but I'm going to touch on this for a second, because it's why they're very cringy for me. Because I always have to ask myself, who's making the rules? What's their perspective? What's their context? What's their experience? And how would I apply that for this client or someone else? I hesitate there. For me, it's an optimization problem, and it's very unique. Figuring out the kinds of testing that should be happening, where, when, how, with what technicians. And like I said, I personally get really excited about solving these kinds of problems, like this whole area of operations research, because they're really high impact to the business.
That's really, I agree with what you're saying. It's with the maturity models and those kind of things, sometimes that's not actually that helpful to compare, because there's no context, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's benchmarked against a lot of people,
Be
but
wary.
You may not be like a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think that contextual understanding, and there's a comment, actually, I think it's Christian put in the chat here, where I think it's he was saying, you're better off sometimes just starting with the manual part of it. My interpretation of it is so you understand what you're automating, and that
Yes.
you're automating the right things. Because trust me, my experience is maintaining automated scripts of stuff that don't add any value is going the wrong direction, right?
Yep. Try to bunch manually. Yes.
Yeah, and one of the things that we see with our clients is when they skip sort of a very sequential, thoughtful process around the journey to automation, you end up with sometimes a lot of noise, right? So you automate things, and the noise becomes overwhelming, right? Because you haven't been thoughtful enough about your plan to interpret the results associated with automation, perhaps because you bit off too broad a scope, too many use cases initially, and it sort of starts becoming almost a defeatist dynamic, right? Because here you are automating, and you're not getting the results you expect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how do you know? So this is the comment was about starting with manual testing. Are there some good guidelines or good heuristics about what really is best for human testing? When do we need a human in the loop? When is it? Yeah, that's a great path to go down for automation. Are there any, heuristics, guidelines, advice you can offer people?
Yeah, so I'll start, and then April, you can pile on as you see fit. There are certain classes, certainly, of testing that lend themselves inherently to being driven by humans, right? The notion of exploratory testing, for example, right? At the end of the day, we build applications for the most part for end users, right? There's some applications that are built for machines, but for the most part, those applications that are driving the digital transformation of the digital era are really end user applications. And there's certainly a whole set of exploratory testing that lends itself to really being a human-driven process. So I would certainly point that out. I would also say that, again, we get sometimes caught up in automation versus human versus a hybrid approach to that. So I think part of the role of humans is also to play a role in sort of how do you interpret some of the signals that come out of automated testing, right? So there's a blending there effect that's also important to think about when you think about what workloads are important for humans to undertake. April, I'll defer to you on anything you might want to add to that.
No, I couldn't have said it better. In fact, I was going to start the exact same way, so I won't reiterate that. But yes, that doing the things that are high value for customers, I think is ultimately, it is in that exploratory testing vein. But also in regression, there's plenty of need for the high value flows, the high value interaction points and workflows that really define whatever your area of business is. I like to keep my eyes on what's the area of business and what are the differentiators, and make sure that those are the most incredible experiences for customers.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too. There are studies about looking at what parts of the applications or software gets executed. There are many parts that don't ever get executed, or very rarely, right? And maybe that's an area where you spend in your high repetition for testing as opposed to your corner cases, things like that. So the good thing is, with test tools, with automation, we have data that we can use to help us inform some of those decisions. Which I think is fantastic. If we want to be a data-driven company, how about we be a data-driven development team? Why not, right?
Absolutely. And to Mitch, I love the fact that you responded to that question in the chat, because I do think these are the kinds of conversations we're having as Tesla with our clients, right? Through two lenses. The question you asked, which is, what is more appropriate for human-driven, human-assisted versus automation? And also just being on that journey of what converts over time to automation, what is convertible. And the struggle is real, right, for these brands. We work with some of the biggest brands in the world that are juggling automation and human-assisted testing, and asking the question, especially as end-user experiences evolve, right? Media and entertainment is a huge vertical for us in terms of the number of clients we work with. And just the end user expectations around a streaming experience look very different today than they did 12 months ago. And that influences your view on, should it be a human testing this or not? Because the experience is in and of itself is changing so dynamically, and the end user expectation, automation can't stay ahead of that, I guess is my point. So you also have to think about the company, the industry, and what's the relevance of the two options that exist from a testing workload perspective.
Well, we could go on and on about this, because we've been part of studies that even looking at video versus audio quality can be much lower than video. But I mean, has to be better in quality for people to sustain with it. I mean, we wouldn't watch this if you didn't have any audio, but you might listen to it if we didn't have any video, right? So different mediums, there's it's a complex thing to really fine tune and know what to do, and that's part of that learning process. You know, we have some other great data that I want to make sure that we have a chance to share with our audience here. One of the questions we also asked was, do you have enough quality engineers, people that are doing testing, doing quality, to support what you're doing in your testing and automation? And I guess not too big of a surprise in the era of the Great Resignation. Can't find enough talent. 64%, 24. We lack the budget to hire the talent. Sometimes you just don't have the resource to get it. And of course, 12%, we have the right talent, we're all good. So, a lot of people are working through this issue clearly, and probably not a surprise to any of us. But what are you finding is the greatest area of quality and the skill gap that organizations either are lacking or struggling to find? Because there's a lot of dimensions to quality, to testing. April, any thoughts on that?
First, just to comment on the data, I think this was particularly, as part of the larger data set, this one was particularly interesting to me and seems, on the surface, pretty stark. And it's probably kind of risky to make predictions, but it's
almost
also
2022. Go for it. Predictions.
I'm gonna go for it anyway. I'm gonna do it. It's likely an indicator of a changing consumption model, and the way that demand is managed for those resources. And what I mean by that is that, if you equate it to cloud computing, it's going to become harder and harder to make a commitment to static resources that need to be variable when alternatives are available. And it's probably that the market is compensating a little bit for that. So it's reflecting that change in the dynamics and availability of other offerings. But, try to spin it as a positive. It's an opportunity for companies to look at more strategic ways to fulfill this need. So lacking the budget, the worst case, not being able to find enough talent, 64%, that allows them to take on less risk while still having access to expertise when it's needed. So I think even beyond that, a strategy that, allows for better training, assignment of resources, compensation, all kinds of things. I think this is just like one of the things that we're seeing in this market. I mean, we've seen labor issues all over the place. People aren't traveling. There are a lot of changes, but some of them started well before, our current conditions. And I think this is possibly one of those. It's just the dynamics of the market changing, and people getting wiser and smarter about how to allocate these kinds of resources when they kind of need to be throttled to some extent.
Somehow you still have to find a way to get the job done, right?
Yeah.
With the resources that you have,
Mm-hmm.
and continue to develop people, help them grow too. Amika, I'm curious your reaction to this.
Yeah, so I actually looked at this data point. Not surprising, right? I think there are, like you said, at the Great Resignation, there's just a general sort of labor shortage out there. Testing is facing kind of more severe challenges, again, because of this sort of explosion of apps, the need for quality in addition to speed. I looked at this data set in combination with the last data set around automated testing. And it sort of shines a light on what on the surface is kind of a paradox, right? Here enterprises are adopting more automation, right? Which in theory, right, should reduce the amount of human labor I need, in theory, right? And yet there's still, the labor shortage is still going up and to the right and sort of getting worse, which on the surface is kind of this paradox, right? I'm automating more, but I'm still facing increasing labor shortages around how I conduct testing. And I would posture that a big reason for that is, and we scratched the surface on this topic a little bit earlier, is that part of what we're missing is the optimization across automation and people. Like there's almost this construct of I'm going to automate a set of things and then I'm going to put humans behind delivering a set of things. And those two paradigms don't get intertwined. That's an overstatement. It's an exaggeration, but it's meant to sort of get the point across that I think there's something missing here, right? Something missing, which is enough time being spent on optimization of the combination of humans and automation, right? Humans and machines being brought together in a smarter way to be able to test applications across the life cycle, right? So there are different ways. We already talked about automation can be invoked early in the life cycle, later in the life cycle, it doesn't matter, it needs to be continuous. And we've also talked about there's certain use cases along the way that lend themselves, right, to human-assisted testing. We should also be critical about the concept of fusing those two together. How do I bring machine and human in a more intelligent way together to, it all goes back to speed and quality again, right? The topic of the discussion here. What am I losing by not bringing those two worlds together? I would argue that if you optimize automation and you optimize how you're using humans across your organization to test, there's still value lost there. And you're actually undermining the ROI on automation if you don't think about how to intelligently fuse humans into that workflow. I'll give you a more concrete example. I mean, we're working with a client that's leveraging a modern test automation tool set for aspects of what developers are doing with pull releases. So pull releases immediately kicking off an automated test run. And what they want to do with us is then have that result automatically feed into what is a network of resources. You have to be able to give them the automation that says, okay, run is completed. I need a human to action this run, which is really a task in triage, right? What do the run results tell me, whether that was a run failure, whether the script didn't run? How do I get a human to then action that result in an intelligent way and triage it with enough context for them to be effective? That's a fused concept that says I start with automation and then I invoke a tester, right, in a flexible, context-driven way to then act on that information more quickly, and then you get the closed loop, obviously, going back to the development organization around that particular issue. So that's an example, right, of this fused construct around testing that I think delivers a better ROI.
And you can keep going out in concentric circles too, for all the integrations that kind of come into that, from getting builds and integrating with Jira and all of those things. We do tend to, in our vernacular, sort of simplify either something's automated testing or something is manual testing. And it's very clearly to us, because we see it all the time, not. That there are these workflows, heavy workflows, right, that have to happen, and they're necessary to do the proper checks and balances on things, especially when you have a failure of a test, and then what happens after that.
You talked about sort of expanding the concentric rings of this and thinking about that shortage of talent. At the same time, it's not like things are staying in a steady state. It's getting more complex, right? Our software is becoming containerized and microservices and service mesh on the cloud native side. We have applications maybe that are in transition or new apps coming on board. Bob in the Q&A asked about mobile testing. So we have mobile platforms, tablets, streaming applications you mentioned earlier, April, as well as things delivered through web apps. But we also have API built applications that may be talking to other apps, other delivery vehicles that we don't control, that are serving other applications. So the complexity and the variations of what we have to deal with are significantly bigger. And I'm curious, maybe April, if you want to start, how do you see that showing up in this data, or do you see that in your customers? You're talking with them and their quality teams and how they broach this topic.
Restate the topic again for me, though.
Just the complexity. We're doing, microservices, containers, and we're doing mobile, and we're doing streaming.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's not like it's just a web app. It's very few of just those.
Yeah. And that's, I kind of struggle with the concept of even getting into that topic, because it gets, we could crack open another hour or two of discussion when companies are, because, many companies, and most of the ones that I've worked with, are starting a process of breaking down a monolith. And so they're moving to a microservices architecture. And so they've got a multitude of layers of processes that are now going on, right? So they're trying to optimize for the back-end pieces, the mainframe pieces, and then they're trying to optimize that bit that they've partitioned off. They're also trying to move things to the cloud, but not just lift and shift the payload, but make it truly cloud native, so that they can take advantage of some of those architectural differences. And so the complexity just gets astronomical so quickly. I would add here that it's important to measure the differences, right? The advantages that you get by doing these things, so that you can continue to perpetuate some of these changes within the organization. Because if you don't, then you don't know what you're winning So I will go to Dora metrics, or, you know, as the speed and quality benchmark, gold standard for how to measure how you're doing from a speed and a quality perspective by making these changes. And I think people know about these, but don't necessarily put in place the means of getting them, even in a bespoke manner. So I would really encourage people to think about putting those methodologies in place now so they can measure the effectiveness of those changes, because it does bring a lot of complexity to the testing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just pile on there, Mitch, if you don't mind, at the risk of getting too far off the beaten path. I do think linking this back to some of the data we saw around labor shortage, I think what it lends itself to, the complexities you said is going up, right? The way in which you look at testing the traditional app is changing. You've got the end user experience that's evolving, different speeds depending on the industry. I think there's a nugget in there around companies, how companies think about that talent shortage, how they think about what it means to source talent in a world that's moving very quickly. And what I'm really trying to get at there is embracing a more flexible talent acquisition model for how you do testing, because it's an acknowledgement, right, that the world is moving fast. What it means to test an app is shifting. You might hire somebody as part of a permanent part of your organization to test something today. That the reality is what they're testing today architecturally is going to look different a year or two from now, right? So companies' willingness to embrace alternative, non-traditional staffing models for how they conduct their testing workloads, I think becomes really important, right? The extreme, parallel or example being the gig economy, right? The gig economy movement allows for a lot more flexibility in general around how you source services and expertise. I think there's a huge role of that paradigm. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but that paradigm being applied. In our world, we talk about crowd testing or networks testing as offering that level of flexibility that just acknowledges for an enterprise that the skill set you need is dynamic. It's changing, not just because of the consumption model of these apps. Could change because of the nature of your business and your industry and disruption within your industry as well. So embrace more flexible staffing models around how you do testing.
Yeah, just thinking about, you mentioned things like supply chain being rebuilt now, and some companies are buying parts of the supply chain, just to solve that problem. People are having to go to unique solutions. So you're right, it is changing. The business is changing, right? I mean, that's driving a lot of this as well as technology. Yeah, and thinking about how we create software, one of the things we often hear about is shift left, and we have some data here that I want to make sure that we have time to discuss and share. We gathered some data around kind of shift. First, we will want to spend a little bit of time talking about what we think shift left means, but shift left when it comes to DevOps, according to our data from people, said 15% said the dev team does the testing. That was kind of where we started off in DevOps, thinking developers were going to do everything. 13% said better planning. 14% I said, I don't know. 58% is continuous testing, back to where I started on the CT part of this discussion, which is kind of planned. But I'm curious your reaction, because I think if we had this conversation about shift left maybe even 2 or 3 years ago, it would be back at the first option. Development does all of this and we don't need testers. I remember those conversations. What are we going to do? We won't have jobs. Oh, trust me, we need more of you. Why? Like, we're at the opposite end of the spectrum. Emeka?
Yeah, so I'll take this one because I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was happy to see this because I do think that, and I have conversations with as the guy who kind of runs partner strategy and owns our relationship with third-party companies, services and technology companies we work with. As you might imagine, I have a lot of conversations with a lot of different companies bringing different religions to the table, right, around testing and how you deliver high-quality applications. And there's still a good amount of religion out there, right, that shift left equals, the burden falls on developers to do all the testing. And it's not a pragmatic path. but there's still a narrative out there, right, that's what shift left. So I loved seeing this, right, because it means folks are recognizing the totality of things and recognizing that going back to this whole notion of balancing speed and quality and being able to optimize across both of them, shift left is an important component of that, but shift left does not equal more testing, just unilaterally more testing workload for your development teams. It's a continuum. And I would also argue, in addition to thinking about it more holistically as these different testing workloads that need to be addressed, and the question is not whether they need to be addressed, it's how do you address them in such a way that you speed up the development process. The testing is an enabler of speed. It's like a mindset shift, which is not to say I have to shift left and put everything, the traditional definition of shift left, I got to push everything to developers. It's to say there's a part of it which is developer accountability for the quality of their code. That's important, right? And the more accountability you establish there, the better off you're going to be. But it's more holistically of looking at these different testing workloads. And to me, continuous test, continuous quality is really more about thinking about quality through the lens of how do I do it in such a way, whether it's automated or human, that I'm helping to accelerate the process, not slow it down where I can, right? It's a philosophy that you bring to how you inject automated and human testing. And it's also about this quality of the signals, by the way, between those testing workloads. So the majority of our clients are integrating what we do across their application development lifecycle, integrating what we do with their system of record for issue tracking. So issue tracking systems have become a mainstream way to ensure collaboration and communication between teams. So part of that shift left, even if you define it as what the developers are going to take on, well, you should ask yourself, further down the life cycle, what's the quality of the signal that you're sending back to those developers, right? How good is the context that you're providing them when you identify an issue? How actionable is it? It's not okay to live in the paradigm of old, which is developers build code, they throw it over the wall, the QA team, eventually is giving the thumbs up or thumbs down. So it needs to be the technology signals are important, and it's why we advocate for don't create a new tool, right? Integrate with existing tools that developers are accustomed to consuming and using.
Yeah, go ahead, jump in, April.
Sure. So unsurprisingly, I agree with Emeka on all of that. I kind of, when I saw this, I was really glad to see these results because it said to me that there's, at least among the polled community here, that there's general agreement that the testing silo is bad. Just like we've all sort of agreed that the dev silo is bad and the ops silo is bad, that having that 2-week black box testing cycle is a bad thing, and that testing needs to be integrated into everything that we do. I would just add that to me, shift left is about how teams work together to understand really early what the testing requirements will be. And it's not just about making sure that the code is designed to be testable or that test cases reflect the features that are going to be built, which this is just good agile testing practice. But it's about the delivery team, and by that team, there are a number of people in there, but I'm just, for the purposes of this, focusing on developers, testers, know what, and I mentioned this before, but I think it bears repeating, they know what customers expect from the products that they're building and testing. And they need to have a really good understanding of the business domain in which they're operating, because that is the fundamental starting point to designing the product, designing the test to go along with that, and has a direct impact on the decisions about what to test. So this is one reason why the Tesslio client services team is organized by, Emeka mentioned it earlier, but organized by vertical and testing practices, so that our clients can tap into that expert advice so that they can interact with people who've been there, done that, and know what customers in that realm of business are looking for, and we can help with the design of great tests that will ultimately lead to products that customers love, which is really, I mean, if that's not the principal focus of the development team and the testing team and the software delivery team at large, then it probably should be.
Yeah, continuous testing doesn't mean just run it more often, right?
Right.
Earlier. Well, you may do that in part. I think it also means elevating the role of testing across the entire workflow pipeline and designing it in from all the way to delivery. And one of the things I've observed too is that developers hold this, I think, even in greater importance today, because that is vital to be able to do continuous delivery. You can't deliver small bits without knowing that, that is going to be tested, it's going to be automated, it's going to have the human touch where it needs it, and do that frequently. Because you don't have a whole week or a whole month to make it up or whatever it was that you were taking in the big monolith days of delivering very large apps. Mm-hmm. It has to be tested, and they want it to be tested. They don't want to deliver low quality software either. So, let's wrap up with this. There was a really good question, a good topic to discuss. We're talking about speed and quality. Well, what about when we think about speed, quality, and price? There's always the usually name three things, pick two kind of dilemma, right? And I wonder if that's possible to have all three, because we don't have infinite resources. If you put kind of resource there to mean in the meaning of price, that's part of the equation too, because we know one of the data points was that don't have enough budget, don't have the dollars to do everything I'd like to do. How do you balance those three? Can you have all three? Maybe, Emeka, if you want to start with that.
Yeah, I love it. You see me nodding because I do. Yeah, I love it because I do think it's the third edge of the triangle, and we talk about this actually as an industry, right, quite a bit, which is the optimization equation. That's the riddle, right, that all these enterprises are trying to solve for. And it's obviously an important one because budgets are fixed, budgets are set, and it's easy for us to sort of assert how you balance speed and quality to a VP of engineering or a CTO without acknowledging the cost or budget implication. The things I would say that we interact with our clients quite a bit on as it relates to that third edge of the triangle is thinking about, and it relates a little bit to some of the things we've talked about already, but I'll repeat them, is thinking about sort of different consumption models for how you do testing. And by that, I mean things that are more burstable in consumption models. And this goes for, it lends itself very well to how we approach the market, but there are multiple options out there, right? So this is not a Teslio thing as much as it is looking through the lens of how do I have a coverage problem when it comes to testing. I have automation I want to fill part of that with. I have people, and then the all-important sort of fused approach I highlighted earlier between automation and people. Think about how you're going to consume that and how you're going to deliver against that in more creative and interesting models that may be more burstable, flex-based, on demand. Because I think as a testing industry, whether you talk about testing services or you're talking about testing software, I would argue we've come a long way in making some of these models a little bit easier to fit into constrained budgets and not forcing an organization to look at it through the lens of fixed spend, traditional sort of fixed spend, which allows you to then optimize speed and quality and price with more levers to turn than you traditionally would by saying, the only way I can test is I've got to hire a QA team of 20 people, right? That's a significant sort of fixed cost that you're going to take on, right? Or the only way I can do it is if I invest in X type of technology that has a certain fixed cost associated with it. There are a lot of options out there for more flexibility about what it means to optimize along the price dimension that folks, enterprises specifically, should be paying attention to, because I do think it allows you to optimize equally along the price continuum.
Yeah, and
April, I know you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this is a lesser focused on area, is how to solve this particular optimization riddle or algorithm or whatever, while companies have been focused on other areas where it makes sense to them. And it does. It makes a lot of sense to look at hybrid cloud models or things that help you, optimize your spend on the systems and ecosystems and all that. Then the next question should be, how do we optimize across this entire life cycle, and what are some of the other things, breaking down the monolith. We talked about that, and getting those optimizations and making sure that we can deploy little bits at a time and test little bits at a time and get those efficiencies. I hasten to add that it's price has a lot of elements. And it's not just dollar spend, but right out the door, but it's like, where can we gain efficiencies in this entire process that will ultimately lead to cost savings? And so a number of things have been looked at, but all of the stuff that Emeka mentioned just now are also really, really critical to look at across the whole life cycle.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing, which is there's a change management element to this as well, organizationally and culturally, right? Which is you want to optimize along all three. Sometimes cost or price gets the short end of the stick, unfortunately, right? And prices can be paid for that downstream in terms of end user experiences and brand protection. So part of it is also about organizational alignment between those testing workloads we've talked about, optimizing for speed and quality along it, but also being aligned with the brand owners, right? With folks that are accountable at the end of the day for the end user experience. Alignment with those stakeholders is also important to just make sure that you do have enough sort of support, right, for the spend, regardless of how small or little it is, that there's organizational alignment to say, look, the implication here is market share for a particular application or user adoption for a particular application. Let's talk about what's at stake, right? Which is important to make sure that the business consequences are well understood as well, and the stakeholders for those business consequences are understanding what's being optimized here, right? And what you're optimizing for.
Well, we ultimately always have to present price too when we go to get that approval, make that final push to get the technology that we need. Well, let's wrap up this way. I do want to announce our gift card winners. And while I'm doing that, if both of you want to think of maybe one parting thought to share with our with the attendees with us today, the gift card winners are Shay G, Emily B, Benito E, and Callan J. I feel like I should be playing a game show here. But so before we do our final thought, I want to thank both of you, April and Emeka, for your contributions, your expertise, skills, knowledge, and sharing what you're hearing from customers as you work with organizations on the challenge and the excitement that we have around delivering quality software. And I want to thank our audience too. We've had some great comments and questions and thoughts that have flowed in through the chat that have helped, it did help shape and guide our conversation. So, April, parting thought, one thing you want to leave folks with today?
I at the risk of saying this, there's a narrative out there that there's one way of doing things, that there's one right answer, and I beg everyone to kind of look at your particular situation as we've probably said multiple times here, but it begs repeating, as an optimization problem, right? To sort out where your investments go, where your time and energy goes, with the ultimate, equals customer excitement and happiness, and then figuring out what your own variables are. So be wary of, the maturity models and things like that tell you to do things a certain way. But I would say invest time in figuring out what those levers are, and make the good investments, and then get help when it doesn't seem like a good investment for your business. There's a lot of expertise out there in your area, and lots of them that you can leverage. And so that's what I would say. The kids are all right, right? And we, yeah, that's it.
Great. And Mecca?
Yeah, so I would just harken back to what I said earlier. I love the continuous delivery without compromise, right? I would ask the audience to, as you're in meetings, as you're invoking change in your organization, be the person in the meeting that's embracing speed, right? Embrace speed. That's the future. Continuous delivery, more frequent release cycles. That's the future. But be the person in the meeting, the person in the room, virtual room, physical room, that's saying, let's talk about continuous delivery without compromise. And how are we going to evolve our testing and our QA framework to be able to deliver on continuous delivery without compromise? And it does, to Rachel's point, it requires an optimization that maybe looks a little bit different than what we've been optimizing for in the past, and that's okay, because that's the win-win. Right?
Fantastic. I'll add to that, and remember, we're in this together. It's not just the QA teams, not just developers.
Yes.
We're after similar to the same.
Well said.
So,
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Thanks to you both. Just a reminder, everybody will get an email with a link to the recording. We'll attach the pulse meter document for you. You can see some other data that we didn't get to today, some interesting results there. So thank you for your time. You've spent an hour with us, and we know your time is valuable. We're honored that you would spend it with us and let us talk with you about this topic. So have a wonderful day and be safe, be well. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.